Has there ever been an amendment to the Constitution that has generated as much interest, and people who never before have become political are suddenly petitioning state legislators, going to their state capitals, and speaking up? I suppose prohibition might have generated a little more enthusiasm, but certainly a close second would have to be the attempt to enact the Equal Rights Amendment to the Constitution, which has for many months now been a priority of those who have become involved in the women's movement. And surfacing as a leader of the considerable forces who are attempting to ensure that this does not become an amendment to the Constitution is our guest on this program, who has feelings about women, the women's movement, what priorities should be for women, what the responsibilities of women are when they marry, what the responsibilities of husbands are, some overviews about why it is that the family seems to be falling apart around us in this culture. Why so many divorces? What about the kids? We'll talk about all these things with Phyllis Schlafly. Would you welcome Mrs. Schlafly? Well, where do you start with Phyllis Schlafly? Welcome back. Always a pleasure to see you. You look very well.
Thank you, Phil.
Boy, you've been busy flying around. I got to tell you what Gloria said about you.
Oh?
She said that you're flying around the country telling all women to stay home.
No, that's not true.
And you are a mother of 6. I want to make that point.
I certainly am, and I think I represent what women have today, which is true freedom of choice. They can make marriage and motherhood their full-time career, or they can go into some other career if they want it, or they can do both at the same time.
Do you really give them that latter option?
Oh, absolutely. I think the horizons are unlimited for women today. I think they can do anything they want to do.
Okay, I'm sorry to bore you with all these old questions, but just bear up one more time so that I understand you. Are you saying that if a woman of, say, 2 children, say under 7, just for the sake of my example, feels a little bit antsy, you think that it's perfectly possible for her to go out and engage a job without undermining her motherhood?
Well, many women do that, of course, and those of us who were depression children, as I was, my mother had to go to work because of economic necessity, and that is true with a lot of women, and I think she's got freedom of choice. But I get fed up with the women's liberationists running down motherhood and saying that it's a menial, degrading career, and that the home is a prison from which women should be liberated and brought out into this wonderful workforce. Now, the home is the most fulfilling place for most women. And let's not run it down. And I also want to guarantee to the woman who wants to make marriage and motherhood her full-time career, her legal right to do that. Because one of the first things that the Equal Rights Amendment would do is to invalidate the state laws that make it the obligation of the husband to support his wife.
Let me just go back just a moment. Are you comfortable in the fairness of your characterization of the women's movement as running down motherhood and suggesting that the home is a prison?
Well, have you ever read Ms. Magazine?
Yes.
Well, they invite women to sisterhood instead of marriage and the family. And I think it's very aptly named, you know. They call it Ms. And if you read it, the only thing you can come to the conclusion is that its motivating, unifying force is the old adage, misery loves company.
Ms. is for misery?
Ms. is for misery loves company, yes.
Well, let me tell you what
It's a lot of unhappy complaints about unhappy women with problems.
Well,
Now, everybody's got problems, but you don't have to look to the Constitution to solve it. We're able to seek our own identity and have our fulfillment, and the home is the most fulfilling for most women.
My understanding of the feminist position regarding, for example, child rearing is that there's, I don't think, any other more sacred, more fulfilling, more satisfying responsibility. I think feminists believe that. In fact, that they are so convinced that it's so rewarding that they would like more fathers to take more advantage of this wonderful opportunity.
Well, no. In other words, they want to shuffle off the mother's responsibilities, and they do describe marriage for a woman as really dirty diapers and dirty dishes, and there's a lot more to it than that.
Indeed, I think that most people would agree with you. Okay, you have considerable support in your effort to stop the ERA.
Oh, yes, we've gotten 17 state legislatures to reject the Equal Rights Amendment, many of them twice, some of them 3 times. And in addition to that, 2 states which formally ratified the Equal Rights Amendment have now rescinded it, which shows the big change of heart that's come about.
And the scorecard reads now, what, 31 states ratified?
Yes.
And 38 required.
Right.
Are you optimistic about stopping this?
Well, yes, I am optimistic, but I think it can go on for 5 more years, and it's a matter of letting your state legislators know who has the majority of women. I think the majority of women are for us, but you have to let them know.
Okay, let me take you back home. Now, you have 6 children.
Yes.
And they're all healthy kids, and they're all well-adjusted.
Right, they are.
Don't you think, generally speaking, in this culture, and I'm not going to pretend this is the first time you've ever heard this question, but I think it's really central. Don't kids get too much mother and not enough father?
Oh, no, I don't think they get enough mother in most cases. Of course, that's one of Gloria Steinem's themes. She's been spreading that around in magazine articles. Guess maybe she said that on your program, of how kids get too much mother. How would she know? I mean, you know, if I were going to take up golf, I would go to a professional who knows how to play golf. And if I were going to study about the subject of motherhood, I would go to somebody who's been a success at it, not somebody who doesn't know anything about it.
So she's never been married and had no children, so therefore you think that would challenge
Well, I don't
her?
think she's qualified to say what's the matter with children, no.
Okay, but you don't have to be a sociologist, do you, Mrs. Schlafly, to believe that there are countless homes in America where the old man gets home at 6, 7, 8:30 if they live in a big city and he's dog-tired from his day in the rat race. And he's about as emotionally prepared to deal with the problems of his children's broken toys as he would be to go out and play golf after dark. He wants to just sit down and be left alone in far too many instances. And this is gnawing at the souls, I believe, of many mothers and wives around the country who love their children, love their husband, but wonder why it is that job seems to be his preoccupation rather than family.
Well, I think you show your love for somebody by what you do for them, not by words, you know. I think actions speak louder than words. Right. And I think a man shows his love for his family by bringing home his weekly paycheck and putting food on the table and paying the rent so that they can live a decent life. Now, if he stands around and says, I love you, and strums a guitar, I don't think that's real love. Okay. Now, you show by doing, and as the mother shows her love for the baby by changing his diapers and seeing that he's clean and fed and so forth, you show your love by doing for people.
Okay, what about the absence? Does it trouble you, Mrs. Schlafly, that there is a significant absence of women participation, for example, in music? Why is it there's always 1 or 2 token cello players in a large symphony orchestra? Is it because women really cannot distinguish themselves in music? Why should there not be more women conductors? Do you think about these things, and do you think that the question is significant?
I think
women in art.
Look, if an orchestra wants to have the best cello player, and if the best cello player is a woman, they'll take her. My sister happened to be a stockbroker. Now, that's pretty much of a man's field, you'll admit. She worked for one of the big companies. They didn't care whether she was a man or a woman. All they wanted was somebody to sell those stocks and bonds. As long as she sold them, fine. But she gave that up to stay home with her 2 children because she thought that was more fulfilling to her.
You don't feel that we're programmed then?
No, I think the fact that more women are not in these fields is because to most women their family and home comes first. And where they like to do these other things, they still don't come first in their lives. Now you look around the world to the woman who's the most successful woman, I think maybe of anywhere in the world, on her own merit. Golda Meir. Now she didn't get it on her looks or her legs. She got it on ability, right? And a very capable, able woman. Now, she is the first one to say that the most fulfilling thing in a woman's life is to have a baby. And this is the career that most women want. And she's called the women's livers those bra-burning nuts because she knows this is not what most women want. Now, she made the choice for government, really over her husband and family, and she's not regretting. I mean, that was her choice, and she does have freedom of choice. But she knows that is not the choice that most women would make.
What does your crystal ball say? I realize you're not a psychic, but what are you afraid will happen if Ms. Magazine's subscription rate goes even higher than circulation goes higher than it is now? What are the consequences of...
Well, now look, the Wall Street Journal has a very recent article, which I think all of the women watching this program ought to read, because it shows what's the result of this women's liberation movement and the Equal Rights Amendment. And it shows how what is going to happen of the new poverty class is going to be the divorced woman. And the woman who will really be hurt by the Equal Rights Amendment is the senior woman, the woman who has devoted 20 or 30 years of her life to making home and motherhood her career. And of course, her husband may be fat and bald and 50, but he thinks he's entitled to trade her in on a new, younger model, see? So now under no-fault divorce, he can come in and kick her out. And now the courts are saying, well, girls, you wanted equality, so this is it. Go to work. And they've got some pitiful cases. Woman 67 years old. Her husband says, her husband doesn't have to pay any more support money. The court says, go to work. That's equality. And they have case after case in this Wall Street Journal article. Now, this is what is going to happen. When the House committee that reported, the House committee that reported out the Equal Rights Amendment in Congress did not pass ERA in its present form. They passed it only with another clause that would protect women. But when they passed it, they said that if, in this form that we're now considering it, it would not only require women to be subject to the draft, but it would relieve fathers of their primary duty for the support of minor children, and it would place millions of divorce support decrees presently in existence in jeopardy. Now, this is what happened, and as the new Wall Street Journal article points out, these ex-husbands are coming in and they're getting their support payments thrown out. Court says, too bad, woman, you go to work. This is what you wanted, equality.
Why do you suppose it is that a guy who's fat, bald, and 50 would be moved to dump his woman for someone younger?
Well, but you know it's true. Now, what?
Well, I think, though, that don't you think it's useful for us to examine what it is about our system or our culture that makes that such a prevalent phenomenon?
Well, it is certainly more often the man who wants to dump his wife of 20, 30 years for a younger mate.
Well, I think a feminist might suggest that one of the reasons that is happening is because he never really learned to appreciate a woman as a person, but rather as a body or a doll or somebody to play with.
Maybe so. But you can't remake all these millions of people who are in the country today. But the poor woman who's now 50, 45, 50, who has made home and motherhood her career is now going to be thrown out and go get a job. Too bad. And, of course, then she finds she's subject to the real discrimination, which is age discrimination. She can't get a job very easily.
It's awful hard to succeed without really typing, too, isn't it, if you're a woman?
Well, yeah, it's a very good career for a woman. They're nice, good, clean jobs and pay well, and it's...
We're with Phyllis Schlafly, who wants to stop ERA, and we'll be back in just a moment. We're with Phyllis Schlafly in Chicago. Hi.
Oh, you're going to start with me?
Why not?
All right, my name is Margaret Corse, and I live in Homewood.
Good.
All right. I started in on this ERA thing when I read the second section. And the second section says that the implementation of the amendment will be left up to the boys in Washington. And that scared me right away, because in no way do I want to hand to Richard any more power over my rights, or no matter what it is, than he already has.
So you're against ERA. Let's make sure.
There's no way in my court. And if I have a right that I want furthered or anything like that, I'm going to go knock on the door of my immediate representative in the state, and I'm going to say, now look, Bill, he happens to be Bill Maher, this is the way I would like to have it done. And I know that if I write to Mr. Percy, all I get back is...
Okay, well, try not to conclude. All right, I've got enough problems here, okay? So Bill will say, well, Margaret, sure.
Right.
Really?
Well, I don't say he'll say sure, but at least I can talk to him.
Okay.
And I have a hard time getting to something.
Yes, that's right. Section 2 says Congress will have the power to enforce ERA by appropriate legislation. And this would move up to the federal level, everything to do with marriage law, marriage property law, divorce, child custody, prison regulations, insurance rates, protective labor legislation, any type of legislation that makes a difference between men and women.
You're going to briefly disagree, I think, all right?
I am going to to disagree, because all this does is it's a part of almost every constitutional amendment. There are federal laws that will have to be changed by the Equal Rights Amendment. The only way those laws can be changed is by the U.S. Congress, not by state legislatures. The states will still have the rights to change any laws that need to be changed. And this is just absolute nonsense to say that it's giving more power to the U.S. Congress. It is not.
But doesn't the responsibility of interpreting the Constitution inevitably fall to the boys in Washington?
No, the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court just made they just refused to rule in 2 cases recently, which shows more than ever the need for a U.S. constitutional amendment for equal rights.
May I ask just one question of you, since your button says ERA yes and hers says stop ERA? Isn't it true that much of the value of this amendment would be symbolic or
Certainly not. There are laws all over the states. In every state in the Union, there are laws that discriminate against people simply on the basis of sex.
Right. And what do you say to those who suggest that we've already met that double standard in the law, and we already have the tools to deal with sex discrimination, and this amendment is an unnecessary addendum to the Constitution?
I just started to give you 2 good examples that happened just recently. The U.S. Supreme Court refused to rule on 2 cases. One involved a law in Virginia that says only men can receive alimony. The Supreme Court of the United States refused to rule on that, which leaves that law in effect, which discriminates against every man in the state of Virginia.
Only women can receive alimony, I think you mean.
Only women in Virginia can receive alimony.
Right.
Now, in the state of Kentucky, there is a requirement that co-eds at state universities have a curfew. But young men do not have this curfew. So that law was challenged, that rule was challenged, and the Supreme Court refused to rule on that.
Are you telling us that we need an amendment to the Constitution in order to get kids in bed on time at night at the
Certainly not. What I'm saying is that if young women are required to be inside a building at 10:30 at night, then we certainly should require that young men also, or that it not apply.
But do we need a constitutional provision to allow?
Yes, obviously we do. The case has been taken to court. The courts have refused to rule. The only way this can be changed is through a constitutional amendment which gives the states and the U.S. Congress the right to change laws that are already on the books.
I think if a college wants to set some bedtime hours for students, bully for them, I'm with them.
But wouldn't you share her concern about the double standard? If she's got to be in at 10, what about him?
No, I think the colleges have an absolute right to set their curfew, and I wish the trouble with colleges, they don't set more curfews. But let's talk about these other points that she brought up. Now, of course, the Katzenbach case is the case which the Supreme Court held gives Congress the power to enforce these constitutional amendments that have this language. And it is absolute, and it does move it up to the federal level. But if Congress doesn't act, the Supreme Court can do it. And who wants to put their trust in the Supreme Court? They've done all kinds of things that we don't approve of. But what will happen is that anybody who wants to get out, anybody who wants to get out of his obligations can then go into court, and the courts will throw out the difference. Now we have a case of this, for example, in Colorado, a state that has a state equal rights amendment, and the courts threw out the Colorado support law. No longer can the husband be required to support his wife and go to jail if he doesn't, because that's discriminatory, they said.
Colorado is also a no-fault divorce state, isn't it?
Yeah, so this makes it even worse. So then the Colorado legislature changed its laws to comply with this new ruling, and they X out what the women's liberals call the sexist words, that is man, woman, husband, and wife, and they replace them with the sex-neutral words, which are person or spouse. So now the Colorado law reads that spouse must support spouse, which isn't the same thing at all as husband must support wife. And now a wife can be held responsible to support her husband under pain of being convicted as a Class 5 felony. Now, this is equality.
If she's employed, though, you would have no misgiving about that, would you?
I certainly have misgivings about making a wife criminally liable for the support of her husband.
But it's okay to make a husband
It
criminal.
certainly is. And
Okay.
any other
Well,
way...
Let me
Yes,
just...
if I may
okay.
say. If I may say, yes.
Certainly you may. Go ahead. And I want to get a call on
Yes,
it.
I think you can't change the fact that it's the wife who has the baby, not the husband. And therefore our laws reflect this and make it the obligation of the husband to support his wife. And I think those laws are good, and they protect the family as the unit of our society. And to have it any other way imposes a very unfair double burden on the wife. It's the kind they have in communist countries. We don't want that.
I promise you I'll get back there. Hi, I'm glad you waited. Mrs. Schlafly, go right ahead.
Well, I just wanted to compliment this woman, Mrs. Schlafly, if that's her name, I've seen her on other programs, and I think she is really a marvelous spokesman for the people who are against the REA. I'm against the ERA because, even though it may have some good things, it has some definite bad things that when, like Gloria Steinem gets on the program, she doesn't mention these things.
Why don't you give us just 2 examples of the bad things, and I'm going to try and...
The thing that really puts a thorn in my side is this draft for women.
You don't want women to serve in the military?
No.
Why does that bother you?
You know why? I know they say, well, we men have been doing it for years.
Right.
But the thing is, see, like my husband, he was almost drafted, so he thought, well, he'd join the Air Force. Now, we had been planning to get married, so we thought, okay, we'd get married, and I went with him. And we spent 4 years in the Air Force, which was great. But now, if I were drafted off, we were both 18.
Yeah.
But then I would have, 4 years that we could not have been married, we could not have had a family. It not only messes up the man's life, it just is
Okay. There are women in the service now, okay?
a choice. Right, there's no reason why they say you have to be drafted. They can join. No problem there.
Oh, okay, so it's okay for them to voluntarily join. You would not want them drafted.
Right.
Okay.
But,
All right, feminists want you to know that there currently is no draft, but that's not that important anyway because there could be. So it is an important issue.
it is an important issue, right?
Yeah.
To protect all women.
You don't want them drafted either, huh?
Oh, certainly not. I think but the thing about ERA, it would not only make women subject to the draft, but it would require them to be put in combat and on warships exactly like men. And no civilized country does this. Not even Israel, which has a terrible crisis and their national survival is at stake and they have a manpower shortage. They don't put their girls into combat. But ERA would mandate this, and this is admitted by all their legal authorities.
Well, but is it fair, though, for you to say, it's like you're painting a picture of Bonnie Carbine going up the side of Hamburger Hill with a knife in her teeth, and hand grenades on her belt. It's not going to... Obviously, prudent decisions would be made, would they not, regarding separate quarters, separate toilet facilities, and...
Well, but that's your assumption. There's nothing in ERA that guarantees that. But ERA and all the lawyers who come in to testify at these hearings say we do want girls in combat, and we do want them absolutely indiscriminately job assigned, just like the men. Now, this is ridiculous. They even want to change the physical requirements to make a median between men and women, so you won't let any girls out just because they're too weak or young or small.
You're not worried about uni bathrooms, are you?
Pardon me?
Well, I'm not, because I don't work in industry. But the women who work in industry are worried about that because, you probably don't work in a factory, Phil. But
Well, I used to.
The women who work in factories generally have very much nicer restrooms than the men. And this is something which is provided by management, often under state law. They'll have nice sofas, they'll have a nicer place. And this is something that's meaningful to a woman who works at a machine all day. She's got 10 minutes to escape to.
Okay, but ERA is not going to mess up her bathroom, is it?
ERA will invalidate the state laws which require
Separate facilities?
which require better facilities for the women than for the men.
Okay, I just want to make sure I understand this because it has been discussed and it provokes a lot of curiosity. You are not concerned that that we will have one bathroom to serve both sexes?
It is a matter of your legal opinion. You find very distinguished lawyers who are on one side of that and very distinguished who are on the other. Now, in the state of Virginia, the state attorney general issued a report that said, in his opinion, that the restrooms could not legally be separated where they are provided by public facilities. Okay. Now, you find lawyers on both sides of that. So I think that's one of these questions. Who knows what the Supreme Court is going to decide? They may go like Brown versus Board of Education, and they may go like Griswold.
I'm glad you called, Mrs. Schlafly. Thank you for your support. I'm going to break now.
Okay.
Thank you. Back in a moment. Who's with me here? We're back. Now it's up to you. Do you want to stand up so we can see you?
I was wondering, the laws, of course, can be changed. No matter what law is passed, variations can be made on it. But it seems to me my attitude about equal rights is that this is a democracy. And in theory, all people should be participating members of the democracy. Now, in recent years, it has become you cannot discriminate against people because of the color of their skin. It seems to me we should also say you cannot discriminate against people because of their sex, and to me that is the essence of ERA and why it should be passed.
Okay, you don't agree with what she's... you don't disagree with her, do you?
Well, it all depends on what you mean by discriminate. If you mean adversely discriminate, that's one thing. But most of these laws that we're discussing discriminate in favor of the women, such as the Selective Service Act. Now, the Selective Service Act says that all male citizens of age 18 must register. Is that, you call that discriminating against women? I think if that's discrimination, we're for it, because the big majority don't want women to.
I'll hold the mic.
It's discriminating against men. And men have had an awfully heavy burden in this society. They work 16, 18 hours a day to support the family. And because they spend so much time and energy outside the home, they don't have it to give to children, they don't have it to give to their wives. If women were brought up to shoulder half of that burden, and perhaps each work 7 hours a day, they'd have more time for their children, they'd have more time for each other, and I believe the divorce rate would go down, because the emphasis would not be on one person out there hustling for the dollar, but everyone, equal responsibility for not only your financial, but your children.
Phyllis?
Well, that's the philosophy in the countries behind the Iron Curtain. The men and the women have the equal obligation to go to work to provide the state with its work that they're supposed to do. But the result is, as the New York Times took a recent survey, it showed that the women in Russia still, although they do work out of the home in exactly equality with the men, they're spending more time on their household duties than they were 40 years ago. Now, they have a certain number of days off. In China, the woman has 56 days off to have her baby before she parks the baby back in the nursery and goes back in equality with the men. In the European countries, she may have 3 months, even up to a year. But it's a different philosophy. In our country, the family is the basic unit. And most women at least want to be in their home when their children are young.
Mrs.
And
Schlafly?
somebody has to provide for the food, and the father does that. Yeah.
I think you're right. I think the family is the basic, fundamental unit of society. Now, how do you explain the apparent disarray in which we find this family foundation cornerstone today?
Well, the high divorce rate is very sad, but this doesn't prove that anything bad about the family. It certainly shows that a lot of people want to get out from under their obligations. And as a matter of fact, this Wall Street Journal article that I cited earlier, that's very recent, shows that when you go into any other kind of contract, if you want to get out of it, you have to pay a penalty. But we're now moving to this condition with this no-fault divorce, and if we have ERA with the women, that you can get out of your marriage contract without paying any penalty. Now, this is the one who gets hurt on this is the woman and the children.
Okay, let me get some people on here that are very upset. Hi, I'm glad you called. Hello.
Hello. I was wondering, Mrs. Schlafly, if you have ever heard of a feminist proposal to have women housewives paid by their husbands for their work. The Chase Manhattan Bank has estimated that it's...
Right. How do you feel about that? How do you feel about it?
About me? I would really like to have women paid for being housewives, because domestic servants are now
Right.
rather upset because they aren't, it's looked upon as being
Something that you...
some sort of subservient work, and it's not really. It's just that because it's been shunted off to women for so
Right.
long.
How much do you think you're worth? What would you ask of your husband?
Well, I'm not married, but I believe that there was... I'm only 19.
Well, can you give us just a ballpark on that?
I think that there was an estimate that it would cost over $8,000 per year for a husband to replace his wife's services in regards to taking care of the home, taking care of the children, being cook, chauffeur, nursemaid,
Right.
etc., etc.
How do you feel?
Well, I've seen a lot of other estimates in the feminist publications of $13,000. Now, that, of course, that would mean that if a man couldn't pay $13,000 for a wife, then he couldn't get married. And so you're going to say any man who can't afford that can't have a wife? I think the thing is silly. I think that the wife is entitled to really spend a good bit of her husband's money. She's running the home, and this is the right that she has of support and to be provided for a home, and I think she'll do better under that system than figuring it out in dollars and cents.
Mrs. Schlafly, though, if you were to have this system, the wife would be able to have under her own name Social Security payments paid in so that when she gets old, if her husband dies, perhaps, and if she's divorced, she could get it on her own steam. You know, she could get her own money under her own name.
Right. Can you hang on just a second? Don't leave us. Let's see if we can't get more folks involved.
Phil said earlier on the show the example of a man who comes home dog-tired and he doesn't even have time to fix his child's broken toy. And yet people are advocating the wife should go out and work an equal amount of time so she's too tired to come home and take care of the child, too. I don't really know where it would end.
You're going to have two dog-tired people laying around the house.
Right, absolutely.
Surrounded by beer caps.
Probably.
Well, I get very, very filled with anxiety when I start trying to speak for feminists, because that's a pretty arrogant thing to do, except to say that having interviewed an awful lot of them, their suggestion is that the burden of the man being exclusively responsible for bringing home the bread is getting to him.
But
and
the woman has...
okay, and if it was shared, then the burden wouldn't fall on one person, and the pressure would be lightened.
The children while the wife is working.
Maybe he'd work for J.C. Penney Monday through Wednesday, and she'd go to IBM through Saturday.
But the Equal Amendment would not force a man to stay home and take care of the children and wash the dirty floor and things like that.
No,
The
let me
Equal
explain.
Rights Amendment
Let me
would not
explain
do
this,
that.
Phil. The ERA would apply to federal and state law. Now, the state law today says husband must support wife.
Not in Illinois, they want you to
For the benefit of
know.
those who don't understand this law exists in every state. If anybody would like to write me, I will give you the legal citation in every one of the 50 states. In Illinois, for example, it's Chapter 23, Paragraph 10-2 that says husband must support wife. Now,
Well, make your point.
all right.
Let her make her point.
You know,
Go
they
ahead,
don't want to
Phyllis.
listen to the facts. They just want to talk. But at any rate, the ERA would invalidate this and make it equal for the husband and wife to support each other or to support their children. Now, there is nothing in ERA that is going to say that the husband has to come home and take care of the children and do the housework. Nothing in ERA will do that.
All right,
But
okay, hang on just a second, okay? What bothers you about ERA?
Me personally?
No. Wait a minute.
Well, I think that a wife and mother should stay home and take care of her children. I think that primarily...
What if Madame Curie stayed home with the kids?
Oh, what if Phyllis Schlafly stayed home?
Well, okay, wait a minute. I don't think that's a fair question. What if Phyllis Schlafly stayed home with the children? Let's pick up here.
Well, I think that
Could you hold it just a moment? Give us all a chance here.
a woman who has children, small children, should stay home and take care of the children. I don't think there's anybody on the earth who will give a child the loving care that a woman will.
Okay, I just want you to... Suppose I'm an extraordinary artist who happens to be female.
Well, she could do that at home. That wouldn't require her to go out and do her artwork elsewhere.
Okay, suppose I'm...
Besides, how many
give me another
great
example.
artists are?
Suppose I go to medical school and become a surgeon.
There are women surgeons. There are women doctors who
Okay,
do
can
it.
I get married and have kids?
Why not?
But I'm going to be in surgery at 9 o'clock in the morning when it's post-toasties time at home.
Now,
I'm not trying to trap your beat.
yes, I think you are.
Well, okay, I don't... No, look, stay with me. Really, it's no picnic, is it, up here with all these cameras?
No,
and I can really...
Phil, may I answer
I'm
that?
merely asking as gently as I can without trying to look like Mr. Super Watch Me Trap Her, and that's not my mission at all. The consequences of telling women that they should properly stay home are significant. Isn't that really the...
Yes, but nobody's telling women they should do it. I think if you're a woman who doesn't want children, I hope you don't have any, because that child would certainly suffer. I think that... But I get sick and tired of people running it down and saying that men can do it just as well, or men should do it, or it's degrading, or something else. It is an honorable vocation, and it shouldn't be run down, and this is the vocation that gives us the youth and the next generation and the future of our country. And most women do prefer to be in their home when their children are young. Now, maybe my own lifestyle is irrelevant, but I'm glad to answer this girl's question.
Yes, the question came up,
Yeah,
why,
sure.
if you're so shot with motherhood, aren't you staying home being a mother?
Everything I do in the home, and I'm out about one day a week on a television program like this, and I think they're capable of getting their breakfast that morning without me. But I have breastfed all of my 6 children for at least 6 months. I gave all my children the kindergarten and the 1st grade in the home, taught them to read at home, and didn't enter them into school until the 2nd grade. I'm in the home with them, and I get breakfast for them every morning at 6 o'clock, and I do believe in being in the home. But however, I'm not going to prescribe some other woman's life. If she wants to run it the way she wants, that's her privilege. I think women today really have freedom of choice, and they can do it the way they want. But I don't want to take away from the woman who wants to be in the home her legal right to be there as guaranteed by law at the present time.
And you agree?
I agree with it, yes.
Can't sneak a call on. Phyllis Schlafly is our guest. Back in a moment. Just a little footnote on Mrs. Schlafly. You may recall her best-selling book. It was one of a publishing phenomenon in the early 60s during the Goldwater campaign. In 1964, the book was titled A Choice, Not an Echo, and you are its author. Let me get some more folks on here. I'm sorry I'm not taking enough phone calls. Hi there.
Morning, Phil. I feel like I know you so well. I've talked to you so long on the phone, and you weren't listening.
Oh.
I just wanted to say one thing. I wonder if she feels the same way I do. I don't like being called an anti-feminist because I think I'm more feminine in my role as wife and mother than these dollies that ride around making a living telling me I'm a schnook. And the other question was...
They don't tell you you're a schnook.
Oh, they do, too. They try to make me feel horrible, and they only increase my love for my job, which is wife and mother.
Okay. Okay, you had, I think, another point briefly.
Right. The other point was, when she travels around, does she find that more men are with the ERA than mothers or women?
Do you think that's true?
I sure do. Not in my case, but I know a lot of...
More men support ERA than women?
Oh, they love it. I've heard so many bachelors say, oh, I love it. Women buy me a drink in the bar now. This
Oh, I see. He gets to... Oh, all right.
all the way. They want it all the way.
Mrs. Schlafly.
Well, sure. I was in Springfield yesterday, and one representative told me he was going to vote for ERA, and I said, why? Well, he said, I'm tired of paying alimony to be my wife, and I'll be able to get out of it if we pass this. He just told me that quite frankly. And Professor Philip Curlin at the University of Chicago Law School sent a telegram to our legislature in which he said the whole thing is misrepresented as a women's rights amendment when in fact the principal beneficiaries will be men. And that means men who want to get out of their obligation. You see, if we have a draft, 50% of the men won't have to be drafted because their places will be taken by women.
We have Robert the Riveter back home, huh?
And the men who want to shuffle off their tired-out old wife who's been his wife for 20 years.
You keep going to that example,
but that's
Phyllis,
what happens all the time.
and I know it does.
It happens all the time.
Right. I'm not quarreling with your.
But they're the ones who are really hurt. Maybe these young college girls can make their own way.
Right.
But the woman who's 50 years old, who's going to be cast off under no-fault divorce,
to be sure, right,
is the one who's really
but
going
one
to
of the
hurt.
things that makes feminists so. One of the real issues is they want to know why this woman who is cast off at age 50 is so helpless in a system that doesn't give her the opportunities that it does.
She has devoted her productive years to doing something which is really creative.
Okay. All right, help me out now. Okay?
Let
Let me just... I'm glad you called.
Thanks a lot, Phil.
I thank you. Hi, Phyllis Schlafly. Go right ahead.
Yes, I have a couple of quick questions.
Good. I hope they're quick.
Okay. First off, she's so much worried about what happens to the woman after she's cast off, yet statistics recently released have showed that after about 5 years, only 10% of the women are still receiving their support payments. What is she defending? Already the situation is broken down.
That's true. Most women don't. Alimony ends. Child support ends often. And in fact, you'll speak to that.
He just wants to end them sooner.
And
She won't get it at all.
The only other
Under his system, she won't get it at all.
Yeah.
Now, you know,
Okay.
Well, now, I'll give you a very recent case in Pennsylvania. Under the Pennsylvania ERA, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court has just simply thrown out the Pennsylvania law that says a father is required to support his minor children. And they said no longer can you say just because he's the father should he be required to support. That obligation must fall equally on the mother.
Is that so grievously wrong?
Oh, yes, it is. Well, of course, the net effect is just as the Drake University study showed. The net effect of this whole movement is going to be to drive women out of the home.
Phil?
Now, if you want to adopt that as a social objective and a social good, to get the women out of the home and into the workforce, this will do it.
How do you respond to... Hang on, sir.
Okay.
I shouldn't ask you this because we don't have time. A lot of behavioral scientists are calling attention to the angry way in which mothers treat children at the A&P. Do you know what I mean?
Well,
have you ever seen a mother stop that and this tremendous frustration that seems to... And she loves her kid. And the child may have done nothing more than finger a bag of potato chips. You know, he's a little toddler. And the suggestion is that one of the reasons that this hostility is and this inability to control oneself is because she's spending so much time with people who come up to her knee.
Look, Phil, any job you go into has got its frustrations. I'm sure you have frustrations in this television job. And earlier today, we heard the young woman who told about the terrible frustrations of the man who has to work and bring home the money. Any job has got its problems, and everybody's got his problems. You have a problem of a mother you're taking care of, or an invalid child, or a husband is an alcoholic. Everybody's got some kind of problems. But you don't have to project these onto society and look for the Constitution to solve them for you.
Okay.
You have to work out your own identity.
Sir, I'm going to run.
Okay.
Let me go.
All right.
Thank you. Hi, Phyllis Schlafly. Go ahead.
Me?
You're on the air now.
Oh, before I ask my question, I just wanted to tell you that I'm so glad you're in Chicago. I really enjoy your program.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask her why if she believes, as she says, that bringing up the children is this wonderful, rewarding job, why can't a husband get some of the rewards of it? I think it's so beautiful when you see a father truly enjoying his children and caring for them, taking care of them.
Well, pretty generally, we have the 40-hour week, and the father is around to play baseball with his kids, to do all kinds of things with them. If he prefers to spend it watching television instead of playing with his kids, well, I can't help it. But he certainly are enough hours in the week for him to spend a good bit of time with his children if he wants to.
Okay, let's get some more folks in here. Don't hang up. You'll stand?
That's just
You
what
mind
I was
standing?
going to ask, because I think that a child needs both of his parents. I mean, how are
course
you going
he
to
does.
raise them one-sided? Doesn't a father have any
Of course he
right
does.
to? Well, then,
Well,
you're
there are
saying
24 hours in the day, and he spends 8 hours on the job so that
plus
the child can
traveling
eat.
time and
Right.
Well,
And
it's
he comes
extremely
home and he's
important for
tired.
some. Of course he's tired, and the mother's tired after she's been cooking and cleaning all day, too.
Right, let me
Everybody's
just-
tired. This
Do
is
you
life.
want both husbands and wives to share equally the job of raising the children?
well, sure. I mean,
Okay. All right. Now, what are we going to do about the job? Does that mean that you work 3 weeks and 3 days and he works 3 days?
well, for everybody it's going to be different because there's so many jobs where there's different shifts. So maybe he's a truck
But
driver.
will each spouse work 40 hours?
It's all up to the individual, but I think that each parent should at least put in equal time with the children, because
I think that
you're
the-
going to raise it to, a lady, she's going to raise the children to just the way she wants. Her husband's not going to have any right to say anything at all because he's not going to be there.
Oh,
Let me get some more people on here. Thank you.
anybody who's taking care
Briefly.
of children, I think.
What about the child who is called the battered child? There are many children who are seriously hurt physically and emotionally. A child a week dies in Chicago. That's the one who's died, not just
But
hurt.
let's not blame the anti-ERA forces for battered children, okay?
No, but she brought it up.
Okay. All right.
I didn't bring it up.
No.
I think child
I
abuse,
did. I said that I thought...
child abuse is a very serious problem,
Yes.
but ERA isn't going to solve it.
Not much time.
Yes, I'm Billy Bowman. I'd like to say that Mrs. Schlafly seems terribly concerned about the few women who are housewives. Actually, 43% of the workforce is female. 70% of that number works because they have to work. And I really hurt inside when I hear her say about what women have that men don't have, like the better washrooms in the factory, and the husband has to go out and support the wife and so forth, and when he isn't getting any of this. And I think that Mrs. Schlafly is anti-male, really. Yes. I really
I
No.
think you mean her positions seem to indicate anti-male. I don't think that you mean that as a personal comment. She thinks you like your husband.
I
so
certainly do.
We think you have a very happy marriage,
I do.
obviously. We'll be back in a moment. What are you doing here? Go ahead. We've got a man in here.
I was going to say that Mrs. Schlafly says that most women are behind her and in favor of staying home and raising the children.
Yeah.
Well, doesn't the declining birth rate tend to disagree with what she says? I'd just like to know
No,
what she
I
says.
don't think at all. I think the majority of women simply do not identify with the women's liberationists. The majority of women know they have not been mistreated. The whole thing's erected on a lie, the lie that women are not persons and that have constitutional protections and that they're mistreated as second-class citizens, and it isn't so. Most women are very well treated.
You have a newsletter.
Who'd like to know more about the subject, you
Yeah,
can
let me
write
just hold
and
this
get
up.
my newsletter
Let me give you a plug here. The Phyllis Schlafly report is
monthly.
and the headline reads, How ERA Will Hurt Divorced Women. But those of you
That's
who
one
care
of many. I've
can
got
write.
about 15 of them on different aspects of the Equal Rights Amendment now.
Okay. Well, those of you who want this may write to Mrs. Schlafly at...
Alton, Illinois.
Right. Listen, you kind of mad at us, too, because we put too many feminists on, right?
Well, I hope you have more on our side because I think that the women are getting tired of seeing the women's lib image on the media. They don't identify with it.
Okay. I've got a break here. I can see we may be here for some time. And I'm sorry that you can't join us as we continue this discussion. Mrs. Schlafly, many
Thank
thanks
you.
to you and to you for joining us on this program. Goodbye, everybody.